Hello, my name is Rich Rice. I'm a visiting professor at CUK, and I'd like to share with you some ideas about email etiquette. Email etiquette is important because email is a very efficient way for us to communicate with peers, with colleagues, with teachers, with people around the world. In fact, your teachers here at CUK use it for their teaching, for their research, for their service, and for their administration to make everything behind the scenes run very well. Email is very efficient because you can send a message, and ideally within 24 hours, the person you're sending it to will reply. So etiquette, or what we call netiquette because it's online, is important for at least these reasons here. One is we interact a lot with the written word. Another is the complex lectures that your teachers offer may require individual follow-up email for clarification. And you might need to get immediate feedback in order to lessen confusion that you may be having with somebody in some form of exchange. And it's also important to realize that you represent the institution that you are going to school at. So you represent CUK. Email has longevity in that it can be forwarded to somebody else. So the things that you put in your email messages are very important to make sure that they are accurate, that they represent CUK and you well, because they could be forwarded beyond who you send it to. You may know of some of these email netiquette procedures already, but I'm going to share with you now some quick basics of email netiquette. See if you know each one of these, and if you do, perhaps it's a good reinforcer for you. When you email a teacher, include your full name and class. You may have one teacher and one class with that teacher, but that teacher may have a lot of different students and a lot of different classes. This ensures that your teacher can reply in a quickly and timely manner. The subject line of your email message should be very specific, like an essay title. You don't want your teacher to inadvertently delete your message because she's unclear what your message is about because of the title or the subject line. Think carefully even before you get started if the message is appropriate for email. Maybe there's a better way to communicate the information that's in the message to your teacher or somebody else. Keep the email brief but complete. If someone responds to you or sends you an email, try to do the same. Respond to that person within 24 hours. That is proper netiquette. Sometimes teachers and other people don't have time to respond to all of their messages within 24 hours. So keeping email brief and complete is important to help that. Edit for spelling, grammar, and style. And use a professional sans serif font. All of these things help email replies happen a lot quicker. Sans serif refers to a curved font, so making sure that your font is very readable yet professional. Speaking of professionality, you don't want to use smileys or winks when emailing to professionals like your teachers. Perhaps it's appropriate with peers, but usually not. Instead, you want to make sure you have an appropriate salutation. Dear Dr. Joseph, for instance. There are some other points that we're going to share here in a couple of minutes, but pay close attention and think through these points too. So, for instance, in addition to keeping things professional by being brief and concise, you'll want your email attachments to be small as possible. You don't want to send a full movie, for instance, through email because it may take up lots of space in the intended person's account. You'll want to consider sending your files as rich text format or as PDF in order to make sure that it appears in such a way that they can view the email attachment quickly. Some people don't have Microsoft Word, for instance, and have trouble reading RTF. Oftentimes, email is used to resolve complaints or disagreements. Before you send an email message that includes a complaint or a disagreement, or if you're asking for an extension to a particular assignment, consider working with that person in person rather than through email. Oftentimes, email can be ambiguous, and you don't want complaints or disagreements to have any ambiguity in it. So it's proper etiquette to make sure that first, it's appropriate to use email for certain kinds of problems and communication. If you have to use email for a complaint or disagreement, make sure that you include everything that has been said so far as a sort of history of problem for context. You also want to provide any attempts made to previously resolve the problems. You want to include that in your message. And you want to suggest ways in which the intended reader of the email can or should resolve problems. In other words, offer suggestions for resolution as part of your email message. Your goal with any form of communication, but especially with email, is to get your intended reader to read it, and read it in such a way that enables the person to be well informed and to reply favorably. So in addition to the basics, think about these suggestions for style and grace in your email writing. Include a meaningful subject line. Begin your message with a salutation like "Dear Dr. Joseph." Reply to messages as appropriate. Use standard spelling and grammar. Do not use all caps. All caps signify yelling. Write clear, short paragraphs that get to the point quickly. Be friendly and cordial and avoid joking. Jokes through email can be ambiguous. You don't know how your intended receiver would receive your joke, so you want to be careful not to include jokes. Trim the reply message information if it isn't needed. So if somebody sends you an email and you reply, you might consider trimming that information in the reply. Consider embedding your replies after each question asked. If somebody sends you an email and asks you a whole bunch of questions, you might put a couple of spaces in between each question and answer each one by one. Don't send ID numbers, credit card numbers, passwords, things like that ever through email. Send only attachments to people you know. And when people send you attachments, if you don't know that person, don't open the attachment. It could include a virus. Consider subscribing to and lurking on listservs before sending to listservs. Listservs are collections of email exchanges where when you send a message to an email listserv, it then forwards it automatically to everybody else who's interested in that message. And finally, before sending any message, be sure to double check who you're sending it to. Sometimes email account programs will automatically address messages and you may be sending them accidentally to the wrong person. Because you got to remember, email is private and you don't want your private message to go public. There are lots of other tips and tricks too. Here's one from a lecture that I gave to CUK in 2011. Say I want to keep a message that's important, but I know that I'm not going to be able to remember the name of the person or the name of the message because the subject line was forward. You can look at the information and then forward it to yourself again and change the subject line to something that fits within the category that you will remember later. Right? So you can just forward it back to yourself, maybe delete the original, then you have one copy that has a subject line that makes sense to you to look up later. So forwarding email to oneself in order to make sure it has the right subject line and so that you can find it later through search in your own account is one useful strategy. Take a look here at my email inbox. You can see email has a couple of different things that is useful for you. One is you know who it's from, you know the subject, you know when it was sent, you know the approximate size. You can store things in different kinds of folders, creating different folders if you like. If I don't know who it's from, I may automatically delete it. If the subject line doesn't make sense to me, like some of these subject lines don't here, I may automatically delete it. The first one is a very good example because it tells me exactly what's going on. The second one is an acronym, and if I'm not familiar with that acronym, I may just delete it and move on. So it depends on if I know what the subject line is saying, who it's coming from, and in fact, if it's something that's already a week or two old, maybe I delete it and I'm not interested in spending a lot of time reading that message. If you notice here, you see some items that are in brackets, like for instance, ATTWL, TC, DOSL, TechRet. Those are from listservs. Again, listservs are very useful research and professional development tools where you can subscribe to a bunch of email lists and they will automatically send you messages that pertain to interests that you have. One listserv that I subscribe to is COS. It stands for Community of Science Researchers, and it is for grant opportunities. And so once a week, I get a message coming from this listserv relaying possible grants that I should look into and see if I'm interested in. And here's an example of a specific email from a student at CUK sending it to one of her visiting professors. And the message begins, well, hello, sir. It could also begin, dear Dr. Rice, for instance. And it uses correct punctuation and grammar for the most part. In a few places it's missing end punctuation, like a period. In a few places it's inconsistent, like spacing around dashes. And at the end, perhaps a comma could be used after regards, and you doesn't necessarily need to be in all caps. So there are ways in which even this message, a message about the celebration of Onam and the winners of the Onam Festival contest, this message, in fact, could be written a little bit better. So there are a couple of examples of ways to improve email. We call it email netiquette. Remember that you represent the institution that you are studying in. And email is a valuable professional tool that requires levels of formality when interacting with others. You should practice this. Practice this with your peers. And if you feel an email isn't in fact properly written, perhaps speak with your peer in person about that so that your peer can also learn. You're all practicing to become professionals, and this is an opportunity for you to do so in a safe environment. So think carefully when you send email, and if you can, consider emailing me. Let me know what you think about this video. Thank you.